it's a higher level than below is because even though it's down here below, it returns to the essence of the Eibishter above. Another reason why it is higher is that because it influences the body, which Lamaila didn't have. So in a similar vein, we're going to explain this in connection, what that had to do with Parshas Achrei. We're going to explain a similar thing concerning Parshas Kedoshim. So in Parshas Kedoshim, he brings in about the halachas of Arlo. The concept of Arlo has a very interesting idea that it seems to be approaching things in a way of from below to above, but then it seems to be out of order. It starts off with 3 years, Arelim, that's Sur Merah. Then it goes, the 4th year is Kodesh Hululim Lashem, that it's in the Beis HaMikdash, that is the idea of Asay Toiv. And then it goes off into regular mundane eating. How does mundane eating fit in? It seems to be we're going from a higher level and then we're decreasing. It's not progressing upwards. So the Rebbe is going to explain that in connection what we were talking about specifically by having to do with the ordinary and the mundane, that's where we're going upwards. So again, we're on the 5th page of the Maimer, 2nd paragraph, line 16. The idea behind this is the advantage of the 5th year is it is the much higher level of avoid. It has the capability to even refine the physical thing. And in everything that you do, in all your ways, you know him. If you say to this, even more so, Kol Masecha L'Shem Shamayim. What's it mean, Kol Masecha L'Shem Shamayim? Usually, the Rebbe talks about Kol Masecha L'Shem Shamayim as a lower level, Chol D'Rochecha De'eyu is a higher level. Chol D'Rochecha De'eyu means in the Rochecha, in your ways you know him. Kol Masecha L'Shem Shamayim means it's your Maisim, you don't know him yet, but it's for the sake of heaven. Here he says the point is not so much the Chol D'Rochecha De'eyu. It's even when the Chol D'Rochecha De'eyu is lacking, Shagam Bi Yoisem Masecha, even when they're your actions. Gam K'Shechosur in Yeradeyu. It's lacking the awareness and knowledge of Hashem. Harehem L'Shem Shamayim, they are for the sake of heaven. Valder Chanal, similar to what we said at the at the end of the last part of the Maimer, where he spoke about it in Parshas Achrei, the advantage of a Ruach Toshvel Lakim when he's down here. Shepoil Gam Ala Gufli is Gufli Tofu and Nafshi Iker, he influences and affects the body, that the body existing, not that the body is nullified like we mentioned yesterday, but the body exists. But it's ancillary and auxiliary, and his nefesh is the main thing. So the Rebbe concludes with a bracha, line 24. V'yirotzen should be the will of Hashem. Sha'idei adibur ben yonim elu. Through speaking about these topics, navoi lemkiyum mitzvahs atluis bars v'poil, we should actually come to fulfilling the mitzvahs that are dependent upon the land, which we cannot fulfill them while we're not in Eretz Yisrael. Shezei yeh lost love. This will be when Mashiach comes. The mitzvahs having to do with the land will be then when Mashiach comes in the ultimate perfection, because then there will be all inhabitants upon it, which is a restriction for certain mitzvahs. For example, Yovel was not able to be observed if you didn't have all the Shvatim there. So already when the 10 Shvatim went into exile, you already stopped observing Yovel. V'zaloi hoye gamazman b'asheni, top of page Yud. This didn't even take place in the time of the second Beis HaMikdash. That you had Kol Yishvei Allah, because at that time there was only the 2 Shvatim that went to Golus in Bavel, that they returned to Eretz Yisrael. V'gam yesh la'ayin ha'im hoye kein b'zman b'ayis rishon la'achar shagol asar shvatim. We need to examine if we had all the agricultural mitzvahs, b'shleimus, when it was a time of the first Beis HaMikdash, did we have the same holiness of Eretz Yisrael and all the mitzvahs Putting aside Yovel. Yovel, we know that when the 10 Shvatim left, then we didn't have it. The question is, did we have the advantage of all the other mitzvahs that have to do with Kedushas Haaretz? Were they perhaps, even though we fulfilled them, did they not have the same sanctity as they will have, or as they had prior to the Aseret Shvatim going into Golus, and definitely as we will have when Mashiach comes? So then the Rebbe continues on line 3 of the last page. Masha'enkin loss of love as opposed to Mashiach's times. Shows you call Yishvel, then it will be all of its inhabitants will be upon the land. Especially when speaking about these things, we're talking about the inner. We're using the inner level of the Torah that we're discussing it. That's the idea of spreading the well springs outwards. This is the idea that this Maimer is in the Torah and the Torah portion of Achrei, like we began. There's also an explanation of the Tzemach Tzedek on this Maimer, the Alter Rebbe in the Torah. Lately, in other words, this was in Tafshin Memches, so obviously around that time, there was printed also from the Mittler Rebbe an explanation of this Maimer. It's also connected with Lag BaOmer. This Maimer was said on the 13th of Iyar. This is like 5 days before Lag BaOmer. That the idea of Lag BaOmer is the revelation of the inner part of the Torah, and the inner part of the Torah has its own specific advantage, because as the idea of the inner part of the Torah brings a revealed joy. So he says, because we're dealing with the inner part of the Torah. So the inner part of the Torah reveals the innermost aspect of everything. So the joy that's associated with the passing of the Rashbi is a revealed joy. That's the difference between the 7th of Adar, which is the day of the passing of Moshe Rabbeinu, who revealed to us, at least in a way of revelation that we perceived, the external part of the Torah, the nigla of the Torah, as opposed to Lag BaOmer, that's the yard site of the Rashbi, who revealed to us the inner secrets of the Torah. Initially, the 7th of Adar was looked at something that was the opposite of joy. That's why Haman was rejoicing and thinking that because it came on the month that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, so it would allow him to be able to fulfill his nefarious plans. But then afterwards, he didn't realize that was also his birthday. But the yahrzeit itself, even according to Chazal, was looked at as something negative. And only afterwards it became a day of joy through transforming and turning over the whole entire month, etc., etc. As opposed to Lag BaOmer, was initially an idea of a revealed joy, because the Rashbi commanded and he told his Talmidim they should be joyous on the day of his passing. There was even someone that was said Nachem, one of the students of the Arizal, that said Nachem on the day of Lag BaOmer, and the Arizal told him that the Rashbi was extremely unhappy that he was saying this tefillah having to do with Tisha B'Av on the yard side of Lag BaOmer. So why is this so? So Chassidus explains, because Pnimius HaTorah, that reveals the inner part of everything, is an idea that has to do with joy, like Simcha, Peretz Geder, etc. Another significance of this is additional to this, Lag BaOmer b'Sfiras Hoyshe B'Hoyd. Lag BaOmer takes place on the sphere of Hoyshe B'Hoyd. V'Shavua Chamish Shel Sfiras HaOmer, in the 5th week of Sfiras HaOmer, Bechinas Achitachten, is the most lowest level, because when you get through to number 5, that's already, Chassidus always talks about that the 5th sphere is already completed. Yesod is already about transmitting further, whereas Hoyd is about the spheres themselves. And therefore, since the lowest level in the spheres in that type of concept, it's bound up with the most highest level. It's even higher than the entire category of being above. In other words, the lowest is connected not just to the highest level, but beyond even the highest level. Therefore, the joy that brings about the simcha l'maylam kom didvag bola, joy that's beyond any type of measure and boundary. By days of boim l'gula mitzvah shlema, through that we come to the true and complete redemption. In other words, the joy, or the hafat samayonis brings it, because then the ultimate joy will be the everlasting joy will be upon their heads.